for you. Lunala and Shadow Rider, Zamazenta. There's a lot of Pokemon that I think this close combat would be very well used for. But let's go ahead and get into our first match of the North America International Championships here for 2025. Riley's going to be leading the charge here with this Landorus next to the Whimsicott. And you've got some great targets on the other side. Zamazenta and Qianpao for Simone.
We talked about the Zamazenta Tinglu lowering the power of special attacks, but the Qianpao with the Sword of Ruin instead of the Vessel of Ruin will now be lowering the defense of everything on the field, which is really nice for Zamazenta, of course, getting that defense boost from its ability, and now we'll be able to hit with some very powerful body presses. Unfortunately, body press is resisted by both of these Pokemon on Riley's end, and the combination of Tailwind and this Landorus's Earth Power can be dealing a lot of damage right off the bat.
And you have to be worried about the fact that this Whimsicott has Encore, so if you do get locked into something like the body press, then Zamazenta isn't going to be doing a whole lot on this turn. There's also a possibility of this Zamazenta going for something like Wide Guard. I don't know if you want to get locked into that either, but we do have the Tinglu now going to be taking its place, and we have this as a great option to kind of lower the special attack of this Landorus.
A really great swap there. The Tinglu will mitigate the damage coming through alongside this Terra Water immediately coming out from Zamazenta. There will be no more ground weaknesses for the rest of the game, and Earth Power won't be doing too much at all.
Landorus just goes for the Protect, though. Good way to suss out what Simone might want to do on this turn and also make sure that you're healthy to use this Tailwind as much as possible. With a Heavy Slam into the Whimsicott, it brings it down to its Focus Sash, but at least the Whimsicott's going to be sticking around. I think that's a little bit better for Simone, so Riley doesn't get a free turn with this Tailwind.
Another good kind of defensive option from Riley there. It's another a method of consistency. A lot of times trainers will use the Covert Cloak on their Whimsicott instead of the Focus Sash, but being able to get that Tailwind up while making sure the Whimsicott sticks around another turn is great. Tinglu coming in now does have access to Snarl, and considering Whimsicott is at 1 HP, a Snarl will be enough to finish it off, while also lowering the special attack of the Landorus Incarnate on Riley's end of the field. I think still a pretty strong spot for Simone here. He's taken 0 damage so far, and is now in a very offensively controlling position.
Yeah, but Riley's going to preserve that Whimsicott for later, and is going to send out the Miraidon instead. And so this is an even better target for the Snarl.
Yeah.
You don't get knocked out from the Whimsicott, but this Miraidon is a special attacker as well. Earth Power into the Tinglu is just going to tickle this Pokemon as the Heavy Slam now gets sent back out into the Landorus. Look how much damage it's going to take as well, and this Landorus is going to be 1 hit away from getting knocked out next turn.
That's a rough swap for the Miraidon there. Of course, you want to bring it in to threaten this Zamazenta with super effective electric-type attacks, but the Snarl was almost always going to be the attack that Simone chose there. Now this Miraidon is at the field immediately at -1 special attack. Thanks to the Water-type Terrestrialization on Zamazenta, you are still very heavily threatening an attack here, especially because Miraidon will be able to act before Tinglu can get another Snarl off, just thanks to its huge speed.
But with the typing that's on the field as well, it's tough for Riley. You've got the choice specs on this Miraidon, and if you want to hit this Zamazenta super effectively, it means you're not going to be able to hit the Tinglu later since it is a ground-type Pokemon. So Riley is going to make a pivot here, resets the -1 special attack on the Landorus, and is able to bring in the Incineroar to drop the attack stat of both of these Pokemon for Simone as he lets this Terra button fly. Terra Fairy Miraidon also speaks to the Dazzling Gleam that it could go for, as well as just giving it a nice little safety bonus versus this ground-type Tinglu.
Makes sense, right? You don't want to be locking into an Electric-type attack against a Ground-type Pokemon. This Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, even at -1 special attack, will do a decent chunk to this Tinglu. Of course, now there's Snarl most likely coming through here, but it's Ruination instead. I really like that, bringing the Miraidon down to less than half of its HP remaining. Maybe you're comfortable with -1 special attack being enough. And of course, the Zamazenta has access to Wide Guard. Incineroar is able to threaten it with a Fake Out this turn, but since Miraidon has locked into Dazzling Gleam, until it switches out, it won't be able to change moves, and Wide Guard will prevent it from doing any damage. I really like that Incineroar swap for that reason, though, because now you can go for that Fake Out, ensure that Wide Guard doesn't go off here, and Dazzling Gleam can go through, but no Fake Out or Wide Guard.
Riley just decides to go all out on the offensive, but the Tinglu is still around for another turn until this U-turn connects and knocks it out for good. No more pesky Vessel of Ruin to stop this special attack output from Riley's team. And you also get a pivot. So this Landorus could come back in for free. You could also get the Whimsicott again, since Tailwind is also going to be expiring soon.
It will. The Pokemon coming in for Riley here is going to be really important. You know, if he does want to bring the Whimsicott in, if it does take an attack, it will be knocked out and you will have no more access to Tailwind for the rest of the game. But if you're thinking that Simone is committing his attack into the Miraidon this turn, Whimsicott could be a riskier but higher payoff move.
It's going to be the Landorus, so it has to take the body press, and that's just going to mean it gets knocked out when it switches in. What a big source of damage for Riley that's going to be removed, but it was also always, I think, going to struggle a little bit based on the HP that it had left, and the fact that Championsh is there to be able to threaten it with some sort of priority Sucker Punch.
The Calyrex Shadow Rider as well, we see, is Simone's 4th Pokemon, and will be able to outspeed that Landorus as well. So I think that is a bit of a smarter swap there. I love that I immediately said, Riley Factura could make the risky swap into Whimsicott and immediately doesn't, because it's not something Riley does too often. Just kind of showing off, he likes to make these very consistent plays, and that's why he's had so much success here. And he's put himself in a spot where the Tailwind, once it runs out, can be immediately set back up and maintain that speed advantage for the rest of the game. We saw the Incineroar from Riley outspeed the Zamazenta from Simone in Tailwind, which kind of gives away that you do need to be investing a little bit in speed, especially without that access to Trick Room. Calyrex Shadow Rider will hit the field this turn, though, and we have the Whimsicott coming back in to possibly set up Tailwind again.
Yeah, but you can see, the Tailwind is gone. The Electric Terrain is also going to stick around for only 2 more turns. So this Miraidon also might be on a bit of a timer before Riley has to switch it out, bring the Incineroar in, and just make that pivot so that the Electric Terrain can give the boost to the Miraidon that really allows it to have this big offensive presence on the field.
The thing is here, though, I don't see how you can combat something like Astral Barrage plus Body Press, right? The Astral Barrage, even though it's not, a boosting item, it is just the Focus Sash on the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Still a very powerful attack, and thanks to the Ruination that the Miraidon took from the Ting-Lu earlier on, it might not have enough left in the tank to tank 1 Astral Barrage. Miraidon will swap out, though, does not want to be knocked out yet this turn, and Incineroar takes the field in its place. Might have to take something like a Body Press for its trouble, but the Intimidate will come through first.
And Intimidate is just not going to help out versus his Shadow Rider Calyrex. You also can't use the Fake Out because it's a Ghost type. It's going to be immune to that. You can Fake Out the Zamazenta, but you're still going to have to take an Astral Barrage. And even now, yeah.
I don't know, it's rough. It depends on what the Zamazenta went for. If you cover the possible Miraidon swap with the Body Press, Incineroar goes down immediately. Oh. Really smart play from Simone there, knowing that if Astral Barrage, KOs the Miraidon, the Body Press gets redirected to the Whimsicott. If the Miraidon swaps out, then you want to hit that Incineroar coming in. So just a really heads-up play there, forcing Riley into a corner.
Yeah, and the timing is so bad on this because we're only going to have 1 more turn of the Electric Terrain, I think, because of Miraidon swapping out. You would have liked that Incineroar to be able to hang around, and maybe we're hoping that you would be able to survive something like that Body Press. But at least you get the Tailwind in. Miraidon gets 1 more good turn under this condition with the Electric Terrain active. The Dazzling Gleam is going to connect on both targets. You don't have the special attack drop this time around, but the Calyrex is going to hang on from that attack and be able to dish out another Astral Barrage. This one is devastating, and that is going to be a double knockout here for Simone to win game number 1.
Really great end game from Simone there, especially bringing that Calyrex in when he did. Knowing that the Focus Sash gave him a lot of safety, a lot of times Calyrex Shadow Rider will opt for it, sometimes a Life Orb to get a little bit of extra power, even like a Spell Tag to boost the Ghost type Astral Barrage. But a Focus Sash is really valuable in this metagame because there are a lot of Pokemon that do a lot of damage all at once. And the Focus Sash ensures that you have to be attacked twice to be knocked out. So when a position like Simone was in, the Whimsicott could have tried to go for the KO with Moonblast after Dazzling Gleam, but if you're doing that, you're not going for Tailwind, which means your Miraidon gets knocked out before it attacks, so it just kind of pushed Riley into a corner.
Yeah, it's really tough because I think one of the very kind of challenging things about this format is that a lot rides on the leads. And I think for the leads in this particular game, the Landorus next to the Whimsicott, I think the Landorus was always going to have a difficult time versus the Zamazenta.
Yeah.
Because you have that terrestrialization to get rid of your weakness to those ground type attacks. And then you also had the Ting-Lu switch in, so your damage output was super limited on not just the Landorus, but the Miraidon as well.
And Simone just making really great use of those two, Vessel, the 2 Ruinous Pokemon, the Ting-Lu and the Championsh. We didn't see them do too much damage themselves. I don't think we saw the Championsh attack once, actually. But the Ting-Lu was really nice for lowering the damage of those special attacks early on. And of course, the Championsh threatening to lower defense of Riley's Pokemon and gets more damage out with the Body Press, with the Heavy Slam from that Zamazenta. And just a really nice way to make just most use of all the tools you have available to you. A lot of times in formats like this where you have these very powerful restricted Pokemon, the name of the game becomes getting the most value out of those two, and Pokemon like Chanpao and Tinglu are very great at enabling their partners.
Absolutely. And so on Riley's side, I think you can see the vision, right? You have the Miraidon. It wants to be set up with things like Incineroar, which is such a classic supportive piece when you have the Intimidate, the Fake Out, the Whimsicott as well, gives it the speed that it needs to be able to outspeed something like that Shadow Rider Calyrex. But we also didn't see the Ice Rider Calyrex or even actually the Urshifu in that first game. So there are some options that Riley can lean on to change things up a little bit. And as we get into this game number 2, we will see that the Urshifu is going to hit the field for this game number 2 as an adjustment next to that Whimsicott. But Simone's made one as well. It's going to be Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and Zamazenta immediately.
It is a nice adjustment. Urshifu is really nice in this situation for a couple reasons. Surging Strikes being a guaranteed critical hit means you're going to break through the defense boost from the Dauntless Shield on Zamazenta, and Surging Strikes being a multi-hit move gives it the option to possibly one-hit KO this Calyrex in one turn through that Focus Sash. I think a lot of trainers are very aware of that possibility, so even though it has a Focus Sash, it maybe has a little bit of defensive investment to make sure that Surging Strikes doesn't knock it out in one hit still. But it's a position where now Riley has a lot more of an offensive threat, and there's not really an easy, safe option for Simone here as well.
What's really interesting about Riley's team is you have this Urshifu without something that's going to increase the damage output of these water type attacks. Typically, sometimes you'll see Urshifu on teams that are going to have something like Rain Dance or a Pokemon that sets the rain when it comes in, like a Kyogre. But I love that Urshifu is here because you've already chunked the Zamazenta to half HP. Like, it'd still be very powerful without it. And you're also, supposedly help to take the Astral Barrage just a little bit better. But I feel like Urshifu did its job. It was able to soften up this Zamazenta a little bit to make a KO later easier.
I think that's really important, right? The Zamazenta now is at a spot where something like an Electro Drift from the Miraidon probably is able to knock it out. Of course, again, it's risking it to lock into an Electric-type move when the Tinglu is looming in the back most likely. But you've now at least chunked down this Zamazenta to a point where it really wasn't threatened at all in that first game. It kind of stuck around and threw out some body slams and heavy slams kind of at its leisure. But now you have to at least think about, okay, do I want to try and swap in Tinglu? Do I think he's going to call that and maybe go for those fairy-type moves again? So Riley's put himself in a much more workable position, despite already losing a Pokemon, and despite Whimsicott going down to almost its Focus Sash already.
I do think like a difficult situation though for Riley is what do you target? Not only is there a threat of the Tinglu, like you were saying, it could switch in at any moment, but you also have to pick and choose your battles. Like the Shadow Rider Calyrex has spread damage that you cannot stop because you don't have White Guard on your team. And if you allow this Calyrex to kind of snowball, then it's going to be really difficult. But it's going to be a good call here. Bolt Switch into the Zamazenta, but it's not enough to secure the KO. You can see Riley a little bit disappointed in the damage output because you were really hoping that with the Surging Strikes and that Bolt Switch combined, you would have been able to get the knockout onto the Zamazenta. Incineroar comes in and is able to land these Intimidates, but if this Zamazenta had gone for a body press, this Incineroar is out. But at least the body press is not going to target into the Incineroar. It is going to be the Whimsicott, but it would have been nice to have removed that restricted right away.
Bit of a sigh of relief for Riley there, knowing that Incineroar is not the one taking the body press, but unfortunately that is the Tinglu difference. That Volt Switch would have easily KO'd the Zamazenta if the Vessel of Ruin had not been activated by Tinglu swapping in. So really smart play there from Simone to preserve that Zamazenta, and he's found himself at a 4-2 Pokemon advantage immediately. This Zamazenta is now very, very low HP, but it's all that really matters. You're sticking around, you're making the most of this Pokemon once again, and of course it gives you the option to possibly go for something like a Protect, maybe style out Tailwind as much as you can, and once Tailwind goes down, this Miraidon's going to be slower than Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Well, Miraidon is going to Terastallize, so once again, that Fairy typing doing double duty with boosting up those Dazzling Gleams while also making sure you can get rid of that electric type weakness to Tinglu. But there's a Terastallization here on the other side onto the Tinglu for Simone. That's going to give it the Fairy typing as well. So nice way to also keep yourself safe from some of those opposing Dazzling Gleams, and just a really great defensive typing. Makes you a little bit vulnerable because if Riley decides to make a really big call, you could have gone for something like an Electro Drift into this Tinglu, despite the fact that it would have been immune before. But it is going to be this Dazzling Gleam, and That's just going to take so long to actually get through when this Ting Lu makes this Miraidon already half HP from Ruination landing again.
Ruination's really smart here. I think now it's in range where something like an Astral Barrage probably picks it up. Of course, that Raging Bolt coming in here too will make great use of this electric terrain. A nice mix up from Simone here. Now, especially holding that magnet with the electric terrain active, something like a Thunderclap probably just knocks out Miraidon cleanly because it did Terra into the Fairy type. There's no more resistance to the Raging Bolt's electric type moves. Now this Incineroar might have to try and 1v3 here, and even though it's a very, very strong Pokemon, I'm not sure it can do all that.
It is going to be a little bit tough. I mean, the Incineroar still has a couple of attack options, like knockoff might be helpful a little bit later if you're able to survive long enough to actually take the magnet away from this Raging Bolt, but Raging Bolt's just going to protect as another Dazzling Gleam gets fired out. We saw even single target damage, what that does, so unfortunately for the Ting Lu, it's still going to stay around. Knockoff also was going into the Raging Bolt to try to remove that magnet to mitigate some of that damage, but this Ting Lu gets to fire off another Ruination. It hits again into the Incineroar, and that's just going to make this game even easier here for Simone to try to lock up.
I do think that's a little bit of an important Ruination there. In the off chance that the end game becomes Calyrex Shadow Rider versus Incineroar, that is a lot of damage that you need onto that Incineroar before you can try to close the game out against it. Calyrex now will hit the field, and Raging Bolt gets a chance to attack once again. You have to imagine it's a Thunderclap, again, just making sure you're not taking that Dazzling Gleam before it comes through.
Yep. One Thunderclap is all you need. Riley knows that this is going to lock up the game for sure because Miraidon was the last bastion of hope for this game number 2. Incineroar is definitely going to have a tough time now, even though you get the knockoff into the Raging Bolt. You would have loved to have that before. Maybe the Miraidon actually does survive without the magnet. So Astral Barrage should pretty cleanly lock things into the Incineroar with a secondary attack from this Raging Bolt as well. Single target Astral Barrage, and Incineroar, you know, it does take that really well because it's resisted, but with a follow-up from the Thunderbolt there, that's it. And it's going to be Simone Sanvito that wins our first round of the North America International Championships 2-0.
Really well played match from Simone there, making great use of the pieces on his team. There's a lot of pivoting options from Riley there with the Volt Switch and the U-turn from the Incineroar. And there was never really a time where Riley was able to catch him with like a sneaky pivot. You know, the Volt Switch and the U-turn were never really able to mitigate a bunch of damage like you might want them to. And of course, Simone just used